My daughter and her husband smiled at my pain, and I'll never forget the look in their eyes when they realized the judge was about to speak. It wasn't the smile itself that hurt most, it was what lived behind it. The kind of smile that says someone has already counted your things before you're gone. I didn't know then how much I would have to give up to protect myself. It started the way these things always do, quietly, with small requests that seemed reasonable on the surface. My daughter Emma called one Tuesday morning in March, right around the time I was putting the kettle on. The sun was coming through the kitchen window the way it does in early spring, thin and watery, and I remember thinking how the light made the countertop look older than it was. "Mom," she said, "Ryan and I have been talking." That's how it began. With those 6 words, I held the phone between my shoulder and ear while I poured the water, watching the steam curl up toward the ceiling. "We've been thinking it might make sense for us to move in with you for a little while, just until we get back on our feet." I didn't answer right away. The tea bag darkened the water in slow clouds. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "What happened?" She explained that Ryan's business hadn't worked out the way they'd hoped. Something about contracts falling through and investors pulling out. She used words like restructuring and temporary setback, and I listened the way mothers do, hearing both what's said and what isn't. It would only be for a few months, she said. 6 at the most. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't, because she was my daughter, and because the house had felt large and quiet since Walter died 2 years before, and because some part of me, the part that still remembered her as a little girl, who couldn't sleep without the hallway light on, wanted to believe I could still be useful to her. "All right," I said. "We'll figure it out." The relief in her voice was immediate and complete. "Thank you, Mom. You won't even know we're there." They moved in on a Saturday in April. Ryan drove the truck, and Emma directed the unloading with the kind of intensity she'd always brought to projects. I made sandwiches and stayed out of the way, watching boxes labeled kitchen and office and winter clothes stack up in what used to be Walter's den. "Just temporary," Emma said again as she passed me in the hallway, carrying a lamp I didn't recognize. I nodded and went back to the kitchen to put away the lunch plates. That was only the beginning. The first week was fine. Pleasant, even. Emma cooked dinner twice, and Ryan fixed the loose handle on the bathroom cabinet without being asked. We fell into a rhythm that felt almost natural. They were busy during the day job hunting, Emma said, and in the evenings we'd sometimes watch television together in the living room. The 3 of us arranged around the space like we were trying out positions in a photograph. But small things started shifting. The coffee I liked disappeared from the cupboard, replaced with the dark roast Ryan preferred. Emma rearranged the spice rack because it makes more sense alphabetically, Mom. The throw pillows on the couch changed positions. The thermostat setting crept up 2 degrees. Alone, each thing was nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I couldn't quite name yet. I didn't say anything. They were under stress, I told myself. Looking for work. Adjusting to a new situation. I could be flexible. I'd lived alone long enough to have become particular about things that didn't really matter. The second week, Emma mentioned that Ryan needed quiet during the day to make calls and send emails. Would I mind keeping the television down? Of course not, I said. I had books. I could read in my room. The third week, she suggested I might want to do my grocery shopping on Tuesdays instead of Saturdays because the store was less crowded then. And anyway, she and Ryan usually ran errands on Saturdays now, and it would be more efficient if we didn't overlap. I moved my shopping day. The fourth week, Ryan asked if I'd mind parking my car on the street instead of in the driveway. They were expecting some deliveries, he said, and the delivery drivers needed easy access. I parked on the street. What happened next forced me to decide who I was going to be. It was a Wednesday evening in early May. I'd made pot roast because it had been Walter's favorite and because the ritual of cooking it the same way, in the same pot, with the same vegetables cut the same size, Till brought me a kind of comfort. Emma and Ryan came to the table when I called them, and we served our plates in silence. "This is a lot of food, Mom," Emma said, looking at her portion. "Ryan and I are trying to eat lighter in the evenings." "Oh," I said. "I didn't know. I can put some away." "It's fine for tonight," she said. "But maybe going forward, we could plan menus together? It would help us all stay on the same page." Ryan nodded, chewing. "Makes sense. More efficient." I looked down at my own plate. The pot roast looked the way it always did, brown and tender, surrounded by carrots and potatoes that had taken on the color of the gravy. Walter used to say it was the only thing I cooked that tasted like home. "Sure," I said. "We can do that." After dinner, I washed the dishes by hand, even though we had a dishwasher. The warm water and the simple repetition of the task helped me think. Or maybe helped me not think. I wasn't sure which I needed more. I should have seen what was building. By June, they'd been there 3 months. The temporary stay Emma had promised was showing no signs of ending. When I asked about their job search, Emma's answers became vague. Ryan was networking. She was exploring options. They were waiting to hear back about various opportunities that were never quite described. The house had reorganized itself around them. Their things occupied the den, the guest room, half the garage, and increasingly the common spaces. The living room coffee table held Ryan's laptop and notebooks. The dining room table was covered with Emma's craft supplies she'd taken up making jewelry to sell online, she said, though I never saw her actually making anything. My space contracted. I spent more time in my bedroom. I started keeping crackers and cheese in my knitstand drawer so I wouldn't have to go to the kitchen if they were in there. I timed my showers for when they were out of the house. I was disappearing into the corners of my own home. One morning, I came downstairs to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. She looked up when I entered, and something in her expression made me pause. "Mom, we need to talk about finances." I poured myself coffee before answering. "All right. Ryan and I have been doing some calculations, and we think there's a better way to structure the household expenses. You're living on Walter's pension and Social Security, right?" "That's right, and the house is paid off." "Yes." She slid a paper across the table toward me. It was covered with numbers in Ryan's neat handwriting. "We think if we pool resources and Ryan takes over managing the bills, we could save everyone money. Economies of scale." I looked at the numbers without really seeing them. "I've been managing my own bills for a long time, Emma." "I know, Mom, but this would be simpler. We'd each contribute a set amount, and Ryan would handle everything from one account. It's what most multi-generational households do." Most multi-generational households. As if that's what this was. As if it had been planned that way. "Let me think about it," I said. Her smile tightened. "Sure, of course." No pressure. But there was pressure. I felt it in the way she left the paper on the table. In the way Ryan started mentioning utility costs and property taxes in casual conversation. In the way they both began talking about the house as if it were a shared asset rather than mine. That was when I started to feel it. The slow squeeze of being managed. I'd been a wife for 43 years. I'd raised 2 children. I'd worked as a teacher's aide until budget cuts eliminated the position. I'd nursed Walter through his final illness, making decisions about medications and hospice care and funeral arrangements. I wasn't a child. I wasn't incompetent. But I was being treated as both. How much of myself was I willing to lose just to keep the peace? The question came to me one night in July as I lay in bed listening to Emma and Ryan talking in the kitchen below. Their voices rose and fell, the words unclear but the tone unmistakable. They were making plans. Plans that involved me, my house, my life, but not my input. I got out of bed and went to the window. The street was quiet, lit by evenly spaced lamps that turned everything the color of old photographs. Mrs. Chun's house across. The way was dark except for a single upstairs window. She was probably reading. She always read late. I thought about calling someone, but who? My son lived 3 states away with his own family, his own concerns. My few close friends were kind but elderly themselves, dealing with their own children and complications. What would I even say? My daughter is living in my house rent-free and I feel like I'm losing myself? It sounded ridiculous, even in my own head. No one was going to rescue me. If something was going to change, I would have to change it myself. That realization felt both frightening and strangely clarifying. The next morning, I told Emma I wasn't interested in combining finances. She took it better than I'd expected or seemed to. She said she understood, that it was just an idea, that of course I should do what felt comfortable. But something shifted after that. The atmosphere in the house developed an edge. Ryan stopped fixing things. When the porch light burned out, I replaced it myself. When the garbage disposal started making a grinding noise, I called a repairman. Small courtesies vanished. No one asked if I needed anything from the store. No one offered to help with yard work. I was being frozen out in my own home, punished for not cooperating. In August, Emma brought up the idea of me adding her name to the deed. We were in the garden. I was deadheading roses, and she was sitting on the bench Walter had built the summer before his diagnosis. The bench needed restaining. I'd been meaning to do it. "It's just practical, Mom," she said. "If something happened to you, having my name on the deed would make everything so much simpler. No probate. No legal fees. The lawyer Ryan consulted said it's the smart thing to do." The lawyer Ryan consulted. Not our family lawyer. Not someone I'd spoken with. "I have a will," I said, not looking up from the roses. "Everything's already arranged. But this would be easier. And it would give Ryan and me security. We've put so much work into the house. What work?" I asked, and this time I did look at her. She blinked. "What? What work have you put into the house?" "Well, we've been helping maintain it. And our presence here means you're not alone. That has value, Mom. We're providing you with companionship and care." Companionship and care. As if I were an invalid being tended to rather than a homeowner being occupied. "I'm not adding anyone to the deed," I said quietly. "The house will go to you and your brother when I'm gone, just like the will says. But not before." Emma stood up. "You're being stubborn." "Maybe I am. We're just trying to help you. I don't need that kind of help." She left the garden without another word, and I went back to the roses. My hands were shaking, but I kept working. Clip and drop. Clip and drop. The rhythm steadied me. I didn't know it then, but that conversation set everything else in motion. The requests became demands. Emma insisted I needed to start thinking about aging in place and suggested modifications to the house: a walk-in shower, grab bars, a ramp that would require construction, and, she said, would be easier to finance if we could access the house's equity together. Ryan started commenting on my driving. Too slow, he said. Too cautious. Maybe I should consider giving up my license voluntarily before the state made the decision for me. They brought up assisted living. Just as a future option, Emma said. Just something to think about. She left brochures on the kitchen counter. Bright, glossy pages showing elderly people smiling in common rooms, playing cards, doing watercolor paintings at long tables. I threw them away. They appeared again the next day. September came, and with it a new pressure. Emma announced that she and Ryan had decided to stay indefinitely. The job market was terrible, she said. It made more sense to wait it out here, where the cost of living was manageable, than to rush into something unstable. We're family, she said. Family helps each other. I nodded and said nothing. But inside, something was hardening. If I stay silent, I disappear. The thought came to me one morning in early October. I was making coffee, their dark roast, because mine was never replaced, and I caught sight of myself in the window over the sink. The reflection was faint, translucent, almost ghostly in the early light. That's what I was becoming. A ghost in my own life. I poured the coffee and went to my room. From the closet, I pulled down the box where I kept important papers. Birth certificates. Marriage license. Walter's death certificate. The deed to the house. Insurance policies. Tax returns. I spent the morning going through everything, making lists, checking dates. Then I got dressed, got in my car, and drove to town. Ryan was wrong about my driving. I was cautious, yes, but cautious isn't the same as incapable. I went to the bank first. I spoke with the manager, a woman about Emma's age named Patricia, who'd helped me set up accounts after Walter died. I asked questions about protections, about access, about what could and couldn't be changed without my direct authorization. Patricia listened carefully. She didn't ask why I was asking. She simply provided the information, clearly and methodically, and made some notes in my file. If you want additional safeguards, she said, we can set those up. It's your right. Let's do that, I said. Next, I went to see a lawyer. Not the family lawyer who'd handled Walter's will, someone new, someone Emma and Ryan didn't know. His name was David Brennan, and his office was in one of the older buildings downtown, above the pharmacy. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 50, with gray beginning at his temples and a patient way of speaking that reminded me of Walter. I told him everything. He took notes and asked clarifying questions and never once made me feel foolish or paranoid. You have options, he said when I finished. Several, in fact. But the first thing you need to understand is this: it's your house. Your name is on the deed. Their residence at your discretion. You have the legal right to ask them to leave. Will they go if I ask? That's a different question. If they refuse, you'd need to go through a formal eviction process. Given that they're family and there's no lease agreement, it becomes more complicated emotionally, but legally the path is clear. How long does eviction take? In this state, if it's contested, 60 to 90 days. Sometimes longer. 3 months, minimum. 3 months of living in a house where everyone knew I was trying to remove them. 3 months of hostility and accusations and arguments. I must have looked discouraged because David leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Harrison, may I be frank with you? Please. What you're describing is a pattern I've seen many times. Adult children who move in temporarily and then begin treating the parents' home as their own. Sometimes it's intentional exploitation. Sometimes it's entitlement that's grown slowly, without anyone quite realizing what was happening. Either way, the result is the same. You lose autonomy. You lose dignity. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to address. What do you recommend? Document everything. Keep records of conversations. Make notes of requests and demands. If they ask you to sign anything, bring it to me first. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything verbally that you're not absolutely certain about. And start thinking about what outcome you actually want. I want my house back, I said. I want to be able to walk into my own kitchen without feeling like I'm intruding. He nodded. Then we'll work toward that. But I want you to prepare yourself for the possibility that this gets difficult before it gets better. Family disputes are rarely clean. I left his office with a folder of information and a follow-up appointment scheduled for 2 weeks later. The sky had clouded over while I was inside, and the air smelled like rain. I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. That night, I started keeping a journal. I'd never been much of a writer, but David had said to document things, so I did. I wrote down dates and times and conversations. I wrote down requests I'd accommodated and boundaries I'd allowed to be crossed. I wrote down how I felt small, erased, afraid in my own home. Seeing it all on paper made it real in a way it hadn't been when it was just thoughts circling in my head. Emma noticed the journal one evening when I left it on the kitchen counter while I made tea. "What's that?" "Just some notes," I said. She picked it up before I could stop her, flipped it open. Her expression changed as she skimmed the page. "Are you writing about us?" "I'm writing about my thoughts. These are dates. Conversations. You're keeping some kind of record." Her voice rose. "What are you planning, Mom?" "I'm not planning anything. I'm processing my feelings." Ryan appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay?" Emma showed him the journal. He read a few lines, and his jaw tightened. "This feels like you're building a case against us." "A case for what?" I asked, though my heart was pounding. "We don't know. That's what's concerning." He set the journal down carefully. "We've given up our own independence to be here for you, Helen. We've put our lives on hold. And this is how you repay us? By treating us like we're under surveillance?" The inversion was breathtaking. Somehow, my act of self-documentation had become an attack on them. "I think you should leave the room while I finish making my tea," I said quietly. "This is a shared space," Ryan said. "And it's my house." The words hung in the air between us. Emma's eyes widened. Ryan's expression went carefully blank. "So that's how it is now," Emma said softly. "Your house. Your rules. After everything we've done." They left the kitchen and I heard them go upstairs. Their voices carried through the ceiling, angry, urgent, strategizing. I took my tea to my room and locked the door. The next day, Emma told me they'd decided I was showing signs of cognitive decline. She said it gently, with concern in her voice, while we were doing dishes after breakfast. "Mom, Ryan and I have been noticing some things. You're forgetful. You're becoming suspicious and paranoid. Last night you locked your bedroom door. You've never done that before. I locked it because I wanted privacy, but why would you need privacy from us? We're family. Unless you're hiding something or not thinking clearly. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Any protest I made would be framed as evidence of the very problem she was describing. Denial would be confusion. Anger would be instability. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, I said. Mom, I know this is hard to hear, but I think we need to schedule you an appointment with Dr. Yang, just a checkup, to establish a baseline. To establish a baseline. Medical language that sounded reasonable but meant something else entirely. She wanted documentation. She wanted a doctor's evaluation that could be used later to suggest I wasn't competent to make my own decisions. I saw Dr. Yang 6 months ago for my annual physical. I'm fine. A lot can change in 6 months. Especially at your age. At your age. As if being 72 meant I was crumbling away, losing pieces of myself too small to notice until suddenly there was nothing left but a husk that needed managing. I'll think about it, I said, because I needed her to stop talking so I could think. She smiled. That's all I'm asking. But it wasn't all she was asking. It was never all they were asking. That afternoon, I called David Brennan and told him about the conversation. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. Helen, I want you to see your doctor as soon as possible. Not because I think there's anything wrong with you, but because I want you to have current medical documentation showing you're competent. If they're going down this road suggesting cognitive issues, we need to be ahead of it. You think they'd actually try to have me declared incompetent? I think they're looking for leverage. Whether they'd follow through depends on how desperate they become. But we don't wait to find out. We protect you now. I made an appointment with Dr. Yang for the following week. I also made an appointment with a geriatric specialist David recommended, who could do a more comprehensive evaluation if needed. I was building my own case now. Not against Emma and Ryan, exactly. But for myself, for my right to remain myself. The house grew colder as October deepened into November. Not literally, the heat worked fine, but the emotional temperature dropped. Emma and Ryan were polite in a way that felt like strategy. They asked about my day. They offered to pick things up at the store. They mentioned friends of theirs whose elderly parents had needed increasing levels of care. The stories were always the same. Someone who'd insisted they were fine. Someone who'd resisted help. Someone who'd eventually hurt themselves or made a dangerous mistake because they'd been too proud or too confused to accept reality. The implication was obvious. Dr. Yang's evaluation went exactly as I'd hoped. She did the standard cognitive screening, asked me questions about current events and memory and daily functioning, and concluded that I was healthy, sharp, and showing no signs of impairment. Whatever's going on at home, she said carefully, it's not a medical issue on your end. I had her put that in writing. The geriatric specialist was even more thorough. 2 hours of testing, everything from memory exercises to problem-solving tasks to questions about my emotional state. At the end, he sat back and looked at me with something like sadness. Mrs. Harrison, you're being psychologically manipulated. What you're describing is a textbook case of elder abuse, not physical, but financial and emotional. Your cognitive function is excellent. Your decision-making is sound. If anyone is suggesting otherwise, They have motives that have nothing to do with your well-being. I asked him to document that too. Armed with these evaluations, I went back to David Brennan. We sat in his office while cold rain streaked the windows, and I asked him the question I'd been avoiding. If I ask them to leave and they refuse, what exactly happens? He walked me through it. I would give them written notice to vacate 30 days, which was more than legally required, but would look better if it ended up in court. If they didn't leave, I would file for eviction. There would be a hearing. A judge would review the case and issue an order. Given that there's no lease, no rent being paid, and no written agreement, the law is on your side, David said. But be prepared for them to argue that they've been providing care, that you're not capable of living alone, that removing them would put you at risk. That's why the medical documentation is so important. How long before I'd have my house back? If they contest it, you're looking at 2 to 3 months from the date you file. If they don't contest, it could be as little as 30 days. 2 to 3 months. The holidays. Thanksgiving and Christmas spent in a legal battle with my own daughter. I thought about Walter, about what he would tell me to do. But Walter had never been good with conflict. He'd been a man of peace, of compromise, of finding middle ground. This situation had no middle ground. Let's start the process, I said. David drafted the notice. It was formal and clear. Emma and Ryan had 30 days to find alternative housing and vacate the premises. I was invoking my rights as the homeowner. Their tenancy, such as it was terminated. I took the notice home in a sealed envelope and put it in my dresser drawer. I needed to choose the right moment. Or maybe I was just delaying the inevitable. The moment chose itself. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Emma announced that she and Ryan were inviting people over for dinner. Just a few friends, she said. 8 or 10 people. It'll be nice to have a full house. You're hosting Thanksgiving here? I asked. In my house? Our house, Mom. We all live here. And honestly, you shouldn't have to do all that cooking anymore. Let us take care of it. Let us take care of it. Let us take over. Let us erase you completely. That night, I took the notice from my dresser drawer and went downstairs. Emma and Ryan were in the living room watching television. I stood in the doorway until they noticed me. Mom, you okay? I crossed the room and handed the envelope to Emma. She opened it, read it, and went pale. What is this? It's a notice to vacate. You have 30 days. Ryan took the paper from her, scanned it, and then looked at me with something I'd never seen in his face before. Not anger. Something colder. Calculation. You can't be serious, Emma said. Mom, you can't just throw us out. We're your daughter and son-in-law. I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference. Where are we supposed to go? I imagine the same places you would have gone if you hadn't moved in here. Ryan stood up slowly. Helen, I don't think you've thought this through. You're going to be all alone. At your age, that's not safe. What if you fall? What if something happens? I'll manage. This is a big house for one person. The maintenance alone is my concern. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything. We gave up our apartment to be here for you. We've been helping you. I never asked you to give up your apartment. I never asked you to help me. You asked to stay here temporarily, and I said yes. Temporary has become 8 months. I want my home back. So you're just going to discard us, Emma said. Your own daughter. I'm setting a boundary. Ryan's expression shifted, and I saw the exact moment he decided to change tactics. His voice softened. "Helen, I understand you're upset, but let's not do anything rash. Why don't we all sit down after the holiday and talk about this? Figure out a plan that works for everyone. The plan is in your hands. 30 days. We'll fight this," he said quietly. "That's your choice." I went back upstairs and locked my bedroom door. I heard them talking late into the night, their voices rising and falling, urgent and angry and afraid. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from Emma. "Mom, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't you. You're not thinking clearly. I've made you an appointment with a neurologist for next week. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. We love you. We're trying to protect you, even if you can't see that right now." I tore the note into small pieces and threw it away. Thanksgiving came and went. The dinner Emma had planned didn't happen. We ate separately, me in my room, them downstairs. The house was silent except for the sounds of separate lives being lived in the same space. The following Monday, I filed the eviction paperwork with David's help. It felt both momentous and anticlimactic. Just forms and signatures and filing fees. But it set the legal machinery in motion. Emma and Ryan received official notice 3 days later. A process server came to the door while I was at the library. I'd started spending my days away from the house, going anywhere that felt peaceful and mine. When I came home, they were waiting. "You actually did it," Emma said. "You're actually taking us to court. I asked you to leave. You refused. Because we're worried about you. Because we care. If you cared, you'd respect my wishes." Ryan stepped forward. "We've consulted our own lawyer. He says we have grounds to challenge this based on your mental state and our role as caregivers. He says we can make a case that you're a danger to yourself." "Then I'll see you in court," I said. The hearing was scheduled for early January. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas were the longest of my life. Emma and Ryan didn't move out. They couldn't be forced to until the judge ordered it. So we lived in a state of suspended hostility, orbiting each other warily, speaking only when necessary. They brought in their lawyer, a man named Gerald Pierce, who specialized in elder law. He sent David a letter outlining their position, that I was experiencing cognitive decline, that I'd become paranoid and irrational, that I was unable to live safely alone, and that Emma and Ryan had been providing essential care. David sent back my medical evaluations and a timeline of events that told a very different story. I spent Christmas alone in my room. Emma and Ryan went out to friends, I assumed. I was glad for the quiet. I'd made myself a small meal and watched old movies on the laptop my grandson had given me years before. Walter had loved Christmas. He'd made a production of it, stringing lights and playing carols and insisting we have a real tree even though the needles made a mess. I missed him acutely that day. Not just his presence, but his certainty. Walter had always known what to do. But Walter wasn't here. And even if he had been, this was something I had to do myself. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what might happen. What if the judge believed them? What if my documentation wasn't enough? What if I lost? If I lost, I wouldn't just lose the case. I'd lose myself. I'd become the incompetent elderly woman they were trying to make me out to be, and everything that came after would flow from that narrative. I got out of bed and opened the curtains. The street outside was dark except for the porch lights and the distant glow of the city. Against the low clouds, Mrs. Chun's house was dark. She'd gone to her son's for the holidays. I thought about all the women like us, like Mrs. Chun and me, living alone in houses that had once been full. We were supposed to be grateful when our children paid attention to us. We were supposed to welcome their help, their management, their slow takeover of our autonomy. But gratitude can't be demanded, and help that diminishes isn't help at all. The hearing was at 9 a.m. on January 7th. I dressed carefully, nothing too formal, nothing that would make me look like I was trying too hard. Simple slacks and a sweater. My wedding ring. Small earrings Walter had given me for our 40th anniversary. David met me outside the courthouse. "Remember," he said, "answer the questions directly. Don't get emotional. Don't let them bait you into anger. You're calm, rational, and clear about what you want." "I am clear," I said. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Just a few rows of benches and the judge's bench at the front. Emma and Ryan were already there with Gerald Pierce. Emma's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Ryan sat stiff and angry. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Margaret Aldrich. She had short gray hair and glasses and an expression that gave nothing away. She reviewed the paperwork in silence for what felt like a long time. Then she looked up. "This is an eviction proceeding brought by Helen Harrison against her daughter, Emma Carson, and son-in-law Ryan Carson. Mrs. Harrison is seeking to remove the Carsons from her property. The Carsons are contesting on the grounds that Mrs. Harrison is not competent to make this decision, and that they have been providing necessary care." "Is that accurate?" Both lawyers confirmed it was. "All right, Mr. Pierce, you're representing the Carsons. Make your case." Gerald Pierce stood. He was a heavy man with a booming voice that seemed too large for the small room. He laid out their argument methodically. "I was 72 years old. I'd been widowed for 2 years. I'd been showing signs of forgetfulness, paranoia, and poor judgment. Emma and Ryan had moved in to help me. They'd been managing the household, providing companionship, ensuring I took my medications, and maintained the property. My clients are not trying to take advantage of Mrs. Harrison," he said. "They're trying to protect her. From herself, if necessary. To evict them would be to leave a vulnerable elderly woman alone in a large house with no support system. It would be dangerous and, frankly, cruel." I listened without reacting. David had told me this would be their argument, and he'd been right. When Pierce finished, the judge turned to David. "Mr. Brennan?" David stood. He was quieter than Pierce, but somehow his voice filled the room just as effectively. "Your Honor, Mrs. Harrison is not vulnerable or incompetent. She's a woman who made the mistake of being kind to her daughter, and who has spent the past 8 months having that kindness systematically exploited." He presented my medical evaluations. He presented the timeline of increasing demands and boundary violations. He presented my bank records showing I'd been managing my finances without issue. He presented statements from my doctor, from neighbors, from the librarian at the public library where I volunteered twice a month. "The Carsons moved in temporarily," David said. "They've stayed permanently. They've attempted to gain control of Mrs. Harrison's finances and property. When she resisted, they began suggesting she was mentally unfit. This is a classic pattern of financial and emotional elder abuse, and Mrs. Harrison has every right to reclaim her home." Judge Aldrich made notes. Then she looked at Emma and Ryan. I'd like to hear from the Carsons directly. Mrs. Carson, can you tell me why you believe your mother is not competent to live alone? Emma stood. She looked small and sad, and I could see her working to project vulnerability. Your Honor, my mother has always been strong and independent. But since my father died, she's changed. She forgets conversations. She becomes suspicious of people trying to help her. She locked us out of parts of the house. She started keeping strange notes about us, like she thought we were plotting against her. The notes were a journal, I said quietly. Judge Aldrich looked at me. Mrs. Harrison, you'll have a chance to speak. Mrs. Carson, continue. We're not trying to control her, Emma said. We're trying to keep her safe. If she forces us to leave, what happens when she falls and no one's there? What happens when she forgets to take her medication or pay a bill? She's 72 years old and alone. That's not safe, Mr. Carson. Ryan stood. Your Honor, I want to be clear that we love Helen. This isn't about the house or money. It's about family taking care of family. Helen gave us permission to move in. Now she's changed her mind, and that's her right. But we're concerned that she's making this decision based on confusion and fear rather than rational thinking. We just want what's best for her. The judge made more notes. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Harrison, I'd like to hear from you. Why do you want your daughter and son-in-law to leave? I stood. My hands were shaking slightly, so I folded them together. Your Honor, I let Emma and Ryan move in because they needed help and because I wanted to be useful. I thought it would be temporary. But it wasn't. They took over my home. They rearranged my belongings. They questioned my decisions. They tried to get me to give them control of my finances and put their names on my deed. When I said no, they started suggesting I wasn't capable of managing my own life. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this. I'm not confused. I'm not paranoid. I'm a woman who made a mistake and is trying to correct it. I want to live in my own home on my own terms for whatever time I have left. That's not incompetence. That's dignity. The judge looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked back at the paperwork. I've reviewed the medical evaluations submitted by Mrs. Harrison. I've reviewed the statements from her physicians. I see no evidence of cognitive impairment. I see a woman who is managing her health, her finances, and her household affairs independently and competently. Emma made a small sound. I've also reviewed the timeline Mr. Brennan provided. What I see is a pattern of gradual encroachment that Mrs. Harrison initially tolerated but ultimately decided to end. That is her right. It is her house. She is under no legal or moral obligation to continue housing anyone, including family members, if she chooses not to. Judge Aldrich turned to Emma and Ryan. Mr. and Mrs. Carson, I understand you're concerned about your mother's welfare, but concern does not give you the right to override her clearly expressed wishes. Mrs. Harrison has given you notice to vacate. You've refused. That refusal is not legally defensible. She paused, and in that pause I saw Emma and Ryan's faces change. The confidence drained away, replaced by something that looked like shock. I'm granting the eviction, Judge Aldrich said. You have 14 days to vacate the property. If you're not out by that time, Mrs. Harrison is authorized to have you removed by the Sheriff's Department. This order is effective immediately. She brought her gavel down once. It was over. Emma was crying. Ryan had gone pale. Gerald Pierce was gathering his papers with the tight movements of a man who'd lost and knew it. David touched my elbow gently. "Let's go." We walked out of the courtroom together. Behind us, I heard Emma calling my name, but I didn't turn around. David guided me through the courthouse and out into the cold January air. "You did it," he said. "They have 14 days?" 14 days. After that, if they're still there, you call the sheriff and they'll be escorted out. I nodded. My hands had stopped shaking. "Are you all right?" David asked. "I think so, yes. Go somewhere quiet for a few hours. Don't go home right away. Let them process what happened. Give everyone some space." I went to the library. I sat in the reading room by the window and watched people walk past on the sidewalk outside. After a while, I checked out a book I'd been meaning to read and went to the coffee shop next door. I didn't go home until evening. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see lights on inside. Emma and Ryan's car was still there. I sat in my own car for a few minutes, gathering myself, then went inside. They were in the kitchen. Emma looked up when I entered, and her face was blotchy from crying. "Mom," she said. "Emma, I can't believe you actually went through with it." "I told you I would. Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know. But you have 2 weeks to figure it out." Ryan stood up. "This is unbelievable. We tried to help you, and this is how you repay us." "You tried to take over my life," I said quietly. "That's not help. We were keeping you safe." "I don't need you to keep me safe. I need you to respect me." Emma shook her head. "I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope living here all alone is everything you wanted." She left the room. Ryan followed. I heard them go upstairs, her doors close. I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet. The next 2 weeks were difficult. Emma and Ryan packed an angry silence. They didn't speak to me except when absolutely necessary. They took furniture I hadn't known they considered theirs. They left marks on the walls where pictures had hung and scratches on the floor where heavy items had been dragged. I let them. None of it mattered. On the 13th day, they were gone. I walked through the empty rooms slowly. The house felt larger than I'd remembered. There were gaps where their things had been, spaces that would need to be filled or simply left empty. In the living room, I stood where Walter's chair used to sit. We'd gotten rid of it after he died because I couldn't bear to see it empty. Now I thought maybe I'd get another chair. Not the same one. Something new. I opened windows even though it was cold. I let the winter air move through the rooms, clearing out the stale atmosphere of conflict and occupation. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The weeks that followed were an education in aloneness. Not loneliness aloneness. There's a difference. I established new routines. I made coffee the way I liked it. I ate dinner at whatever time felt right. I watched television in the living room without worrying about who else needed the space. I went to bed late and got up early and moved through the house like I owned it. Because I did. Emma sent a few text messages. They were short and hurt-sounding. She hoped I was happy. She hoped I knew what I'd done. She hoped I didn't regret it when I really was alone and needing help someday. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that would change anything. My son called. Emma had told him her version of events, and he wanted to hear mine. I gave him the short version, that Emma and Ryan had moved in temporarily and stayed permanently, that I'd asked them to leave, that they'd refused, and I'd taken legal action. That must have been hard, he said. It was. but it was necessary. Are you sure you're okay out there by yourself, Mom? I'm sure. If you ever need anything, I'll call. I promise. We talked a bit longer about his family, his work, ordinary things that felt like a gift after months of tension. Spring came. I hired someone to help with the yard work I couldn't manage alone. I repainted the kitchen. I joined a book club at the library. I started having coffee with Mrs. Chen on Tuesday mornings. The house settled back into itself. So did I. I thought about Walter often. About what he would make of all this. I thought he'd be proud of me, though maybe also a little surprised. I'd surprised myself. One afternoon in late April, I found a photograph I'd forgotten about. It was from Emma's childhood. She was maybe 7 or 8, grinning at the camera with dirt on her face from playing in the garden. Walter was next to her, laughing. I looked at it for a long time. That little girl had grown into a woman I didn't always recognize. Or maybe I'd never known her as well as I thought I did. Maybe the distance between parent and child was always wider than it seemed, filled with assumptions and projections and hopes that didn't quite match reality. I put the photo in a drawer, not throwing it away, just putting it somewhere I wouldn't have to see it every day. In May, Emma called. Not texted, actually called. "Mom," she said when I answered. "Hello, Emma." There was a long pause. I've been thinking about everything that happened. I waited. I'm not ready to apologize. I still think you were wrong. But I miss you. I miss you too, I said, and it was true. I miss the daughter I'd thought she was. I miss the relationship I'd thought we had. Can we talk sometime? Maybe coffee? Maybe. Someday. When you're ready to understand why I did what I did. I don't know if I'll ever understand that. Then maybe we're not ready yet. Another pause. Okay, I'll call again sometime. I'd like that. She hung up, and I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, feeling both sad and settled. The truth was, I didn't know if Emma and I would ever fully repair what had broken. Maybe we would. Maybe we wouldn't. But I'd learned something important through all of this. I couldn't sacrifice myself to keep someone else comfortable, even if that someone was my daughter. Love doesn't require self-erasure. Family doesn't mean surrendering boundaries. It took me 72 years to fully understand that. Now, in the quiet of my own home, with my own coffee in my own cup at my own table, I was finally learning what it meant to belong to myself. The house made its familiar sounds around me. The refrigerator humming. The clock ticking. The small creaks and settlings of an old structure breathing through another day. These were my sounds now. My space. My life. I'd fought for it and I'd won it back, and whatever came next would be on my terms. That evening I sat in the garden as the light faded. The roses were blooming again, pink and red and white against the green. I'd planted some of them with Walter 30 years ago. They'd outlived him. They'd outlive me too, probably, if whoever came after me took care of them. There was something comforting in that. The continuity of small things. Gardens and houses and quiet routines that persist regardless of the dramas that unfold within them. A neighbor walked past with a dog and waved. I waved back. Mrs. Chun's light came on across the street. The sky deepened from blue to purple to black, and stars appeared one by one in the spaces between the clouds. I stayed outside until I was cold, then went in and locked the door behind me. My door, my lock, my choice. I made myself dinner and ate it slowly, tasting each bite. I washed the dishes by hand and put them away in the cabinets where I decided they belonged. I turned off the lights downstairs and climbed the stairs to my room. Before bed, I stood at the window and looked out at the dark street, the quiet houses, the ordinary neighborhood where I'd lived for 40 years. This was my life, smaller than it once was, perhaps, quieter, but mine. And that was enough. More than enough. In the morning, I'd wake up and make coffee and decide how to spend my day. Maybe I'd read. Maybe I'd go to the library. Maybe I'd do nothing at all. The choice would be mine, and that simple fact that fundamental freedom was worth every difficult moment it had taken to reclaim it. I pulled the curtains closed and got into bed. The house was silent around me. Not the tense silence of people avoiding each other, but the peaceful silence of space that belongs only to itself. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt completely at home.